Shana Tova, good to see you all again. I hope the traffic was okay getting home yesterday. You know, this is the first year when I can say that the sanctuary is just as full on the second day as it was on the first. So it's the fall of 1975. A college freshman sits in the back row of a special faculty teach-in on Zionism. It's a time of particular peril in the Middle East. A bomb has just claimed lots of casualties near Jerusalem's Zion Square. It's followed by a retaliatory attack by Israel on Palestinian bases in Lebanon, killing over 100. As a result, the UN condemns Israel and even goes beyond that, delegitimizing Zionism, calling it a form of racism, and the whole world just piles on. Now, this is on top of the fact that a few months before, Yasser Arafat was honored by the nations of the world as he addressed the UN with a gun in his hand. So the freshman in that back row at the teach-in is seething with anger, convinced that the next resolution will call for the creation of a giant yellow star to be placed on top of Israel from Eilat to Metula. The teach-in is designed to nudge timid young Jews out of their hiding places to face the facts and hear the other side, Israel's side. The intellectual arguments, not all the blue and white buttons, and reasoned advocacy, not whitewashed puffery. So that's what was going on that afternoon. And then 3 anti-Zionists show up and start asking questions. The room is filled with 100 silent, gasping young Jews and becomes tense as we listen to the propaganda. No one is prepared to respond as articulately to these well-crafted lies. A few even applaud the speeches. Then an elderly Jew sitting in the back, scarred from years of battle with the human race, his arm tattooed with a number, stands up and points a long, twisted finger at the intruders. He says nothing. This wordless statement teaches the freshman more than the previous 2 hours of lecture and debate. This man, so fragile and yet so determined, extends his finger as if to utter j'accuse, and the PLO apologists can't answer him. He sits down. The college freshman smiles at the man who is sitting in the same row. He wants to hug him. He wants to thank the stranger with the number on his arm, who strolled into an Ivy League auditorium to make some sense of the madness that he has endured to save some Jews who, so stripped bare by their apathy, don't even realize that they're in danger. The room is filled with tension. 100 young Jews have been confronted, many for the first time in their lives, with the unalterable fact of their Jewishness. The freshman leaves the symposium shaken to the core. People around him weigh the merits of one argument versus another. They talk about facts, resolutions, opinions, and a few square miles of land. The student seethes, but the hate is directed as much inward as it is outward. Why did I wait for this old guy to speak out, he asks himself. Why didn't I speak out before it was too late? Why was I ashamed of my Jewishness? Why did I let my people down? Why did I let Israel down? Why doesn't the world let Jews live in dignity in the only little state we've had for 2,000 years? The boy is furious with the world, the hypocrisy, the ceaseless hatred of Jews by others and by Jews themselves. That little boy was me. Like that little girl in California who told a similar story about waiting for her school bus during the second year of integration. I too was waiting for a world where my people would finally feel included, valued, welcomed, trusted, where we would have the dignity so that we so lacked and the homeland that we so deserved, that we'd be able to live without fear. No, not the fear of physical attack. No, not here in America, but the fear of being engulfed by the shadows of eternal victimhood. I too was waiting for my fellow Jews to feel just an ounce of pride in who they are. For me, while growing up, Israel gave me that pride. I can recall one summer as a teenager, just before my first trip on a teen tour there, when I lay on my bed at my parents' summer home on Cape Cod and I read Leon Uris's book, Exodus, cover to cover. Stayed up all night. That book changed me. And yes, it's not great literature, and yes, it's got historical inaccuracies, and yes, it created a utopian image of Israel that has been punctured time and time again. But man, I wanted to be Ari ben Canaan. Leon Uris's mythological Übermensch was a Jew, but not just any Jew. He was a Jew who shed all the baggage, all the shtetl dust, the neuroses, the pasty yeshiva look, the traditions too. The quintessential Jew was unmasked and revealed to be Paul Newman. Well, not exactly. In the book, Ari is darker than Newman. In the book, his father, with a funny first name, Barak, literally walked to Palestine from Russia with a brother to escape the pogroms. And when they arrived in the Promised Land, it was desolate but beautiful as they first viewed it from the peak of one of the highest mountains in the Galilee, coming from the north, nestled between Sfat and Rosh Pinah. And Barak fell so in love with that land that at that moment he took the name of the mountain where he stood as his new last name, marking his complete transformation, his liberation from the enslavement of the ghetto, from the humiliations of his people's past. And he took the last name, Ben Canaan, the son of Canaan. Now, yesterday we spoke of the curse of Canaan, a curse that, according to some, condemned those of African descent and dark complexion to an eternity of servitude. Today I focus on the blessing of Canaan, a blessing that can set us all free. Ari ben Canaan is fictional, but the symbolism of Canaan for modern Zionism is real. In the Torah, the Canaanites needed to be conquered because they stood for all that the Torah despised: paganism, the worship of nature and the land, an obsession with strength, youth, virility, fertility. But the early Zionists wanted to shed the shackles of tradition and return to the land, loved all of those things. And they loved the land most of all, the land flowing with milk and honey. And that is the land that the Torah calls Canaan. Canaan is the only promised land that the Torah knows. In the 1930s and 1940s, some revisionist Zionist intellectuals in Palestine founded an ideology that they called Canaanism, which sought to create a unique Hebrew identity rooted in ancient Canaanite culture. And the goal was to take them away from the diaspora-based Jewish one. In fact, archaeologists and genetic researchers have shown that in the Bible, Israel and Canaan were closely related. They intermarried quite a bit, which, why would the prophets have made such a fuss about it if they didn't? They were less adversaries and more like frenemies. So some of the early great Zionist thinkers and writers praised these ancient ties to the land's indigenous culture. For instance, the poet Chernikovsky, who ditched Odessa before making his way to the Promised Land in the late 19th century and early 20th, He's no fringe figure in Zionist history. He's on the money. His face is, his name is in street signs in big cities. One of his poems almost became the national anthem instead of Hatikva. Sachki al hachalomot. It's a famous Hebrew song. Then my people too will flourish, and a generation shall arise in the land. Shake off its chains. See the light in every eye. It shall live, love, accomplish, labor. In the land, it is alive. And in another poem, Chernikovsky proclaimed, Dor el ba'aretz, shkor shefa hachayim, nachri lagoy chole ulevet hakoavim. A generation of gods walks the land, a generation drunk on life, estranged from a sick people and a tribe of sufferers. The Jews were this sick people, accursed by their estrangement from their homeland. The curse was the curse of the ghetto. What they needed was the blessing of Canaan. That's a strain throughout all of early Zionist thinking. In 1882, the writer Leo Pinsker looked at the Jewish condition from his perch in Russia and composed this prescription for redemption. He called it auto-emancipation. He called the Jews a ghost-like people in the shtetl where they were. He wrote, to sum up then, to the living the Jew is a corpse, to the native a foreigner, to the homesteader a vagrant, to the proprietary a beggar, to the poor an exploiter and a millionaire, to the patriot a man without a country, for all a hated rival. And he also wrote, national self-respect. Where can we find it? It's precisely the great misfortune of our race that we do not constitute a nation, but are merely Jews. We're a flock scattered over the whole face of the earth, no shepherd to protect us and bring us together. At best, we attain the rank of goats, which in Russia are mated with racehorses, and that is the highest reach of our ambition. The man did not mince words. In his mind and in the mind of so many, Jews were a people devoid of dignity. And that required a return to the promised land where we would be able at long last to remove the curse of Canaan. For Jews, it means something very different than for Africans, for blacks. It can be found in the etymology of the word. The Semitic root, Canaan, means to be low, humble, subjugated. But there's another meaning, a different meaning. And here lies the key, the pathway for turning the curse into a blessing and a demonstration of something that links the Jewish experience to that of the African American. It was discovered in 1936. The biblical scholar Ephraim Spicer proposed that the word Canaan comes from an ancient Near Eastern term that described them, the people, the Canaanites, as Kenahu, or having a purplish hue, possibly because of their Phoenician roots from the sea. So perhaps the blessing of Canaan and this thirst for pride and dignity has something to do with that color, the color purple. Alice Walker wrote famously in her book of that title, I think it pisses God off when you walk by the color purple in a field and don't notice it. Purple is the color of unity, inner pride, a confidence to compromise. It allows the blue and the red to come together. It can't help but be noticed. And in the Bible and in post-biblical works, there are numerous sources, including the priestly vestments, that talk about royalty and dignity and the color purple. The blessing of Canaan is the blessing of inner and outer beauty, of being beautiful and knowing it. That's what Jews gained when we returned to the promised land after 2,000 years. And it's what blacks affirmed when Martin Luther King talked about the metaphoric promised land that he so badly wanted to reach, even as he knew he would not. After 400 years of slavery in Egypt, according to biblical sources, the children of Israel embarked on a 40-year journey and reached Canaan. And then we were kicked out, got back in, out, in, we've been to Canaan, we want to go back again. And then at long last we did go back, hopefully to stay. Meanwhile, after 400 years of oppression on these shores, since 1619, the people of Martin Luther King yearn for a promised land as well. Martin Luther King said, "One's dignity may be assaulted, vandalized, cruelly mocked, but it can never be taken away unless it is surrendered." The curse of Canaan is just that, the surrender of dignity, and accepting the branding inflicted upon you in order to subjugate you. The blessing of Canaan is finding the wherewithal to overcome it, to somehow reach your destination. Ibram X. Kendi writes about how blacks were forced to be docile and illiterate, and then accused of being docile and illiterate, and therefore not deserving of freedom. How about the Jews, forced to change their names just to be tolerated in boardrooms and Hollywood studios, earning acceptance by blending in and not making waves, reduced to writing Christmas songs and straightening our noses in order to be accepted? Blacks had to straighten their hair. Jews were accused then, having had to do all these things, of being shapeshifters, chameleon-like, like Woody Allen's Zelig, slithery, but never really American, never truly loyal. Blacks who tried to look too light were accused of trying to pass as white. These are just some of the microaggressions that both groups have experienced. The curse of Canaan is the libelous canard of the lazy black and the conniving Jew. Both of them are too slothful to put in an honest day's work. The curse of Canaan is the curse of passivity, dependence, and inaction. It is the curse of Tevye and Uncle Tom, beloved and misunderstood, and ultimately too willing to accept their lot in life rather than to fight to change the traditions of their day. I was looking at an exhibit at the Jim Crow Museum, and it shows how the Uncle Tom caricature portrayed black men as faithful, happy, submissive servants. This character, like the Mammy caricature for women, was born in antebellum America in the defense of slavery. How could slavery be wrong, argued its proponents, if black servants, both males and females, were contented and loyal? The Tom is presented as a smiling, wide-eyed, dark-skinned server, field worker, cook, butler, porter, or waiter. As for Sholem Aleichem's Tevye, one essayist said of him, "He's a schlemazel who provides a running commentary on his own schlemazelhood. He is Job with a punchline. He calls out to God, 'Good dear God.' But he should be screaming at God. He is the embodiment of that frog in the pot slowly being brought to a boil, incrementally accepting an increasingly traumatic world around him. With a shrug and a grin and a joke, there was a pogrom at his daughter's wedding. Eventually, there was exile. When that final edict is given, he packs with a sigh and states, 'I suppose we'll have to keep waiting for the Messiah somewhere else. Meanwhile, let's start packing.'" The curse of Canaan is the curse of insidious stereotypes, like the happy Aunt Jemima and the neurotic Jewish comic. It's the curse of the minstrel show in blackface and the enlarged noses photoshopped on Jewish candidates in political ads. In the 2020 campaign, both of these are still a thing. It's the curse of a forced sense of inferiority born of an unjust system. We've seen it all. The deep shame at our parents' passivity during the Holocaust, as the early Zionists felt the same about the shtetl. A deeper sense of anger that our parents were put through all that, their egos crushed in their subservience, wanting nothing more than simply to fit in. That's the anger that I felt as a freshman at that teach-in at Brown in 1975. And that's the anger that I still feel today. Jews and blacks have been cursed by the indignity of being considered carriers of disease and filth. Jews were banned from German swimming pools and quarantined during the cholera and typhus epidemics of 1892. This is not Nazi era. 1892. 4 years later, 1896, May 18th to be exact, New Orleans judge John Ferguson defended the infamous Plessy versus Ferguson ruling that established Jim Crow, claiming that, quote, foul odors of blacks in close quarters, unquote, made the law reasonable. These canards continue to this day. I Googled the expression dirty Jew so that you don't have to, and the results weren't pretty. This chart that's on your screen right now shows a usage of the term that has been steadily increasing through the decades. We never stopped being called dirty Jews, we just got numb to it. Well, America, here's something ironic. This summer, Europe didn't want Pigpen to come over and play. Hey, Jim Crow, you can stick this in your whites-only toilet. It looks like all of America has become, in the eyes of the world, foul and disease-ridden. We have become, all of America, in the eyes of the world, what some might call a blank hole country. It looks like America could use a piece of Minnie's chocolate pie. So it's true that I don't completely understand what it's like to be black in America today or for the past 400 years, but I do understand what Philip Roth wrote in The Plot Against America, describing a Jew attending a fascist Limburg campaign rally, when he wrote, "You have to be there to see what it looked like. They live in a dream, and we live in a nightmare." We Jews get it. We get the pain of the Confederate flag because we've seen the swastika. We know how hurtful are the microaggressions of instinctively suspecting a dark person who's wearing a hoodie, because Jews have been teased by people throwing a coin into a taxi. And it's amazing how blacks can be simultaneously considered docile and aggressive, subservient and scary at the same time. Neat trick. Just as Jews are seen simultaneously as both socialist radicals and corrupt capitalists. You got to pick one, guys. Are we Rothschild or are we Trotsky? Get your story straight. We get it, that we can all be worn down by hate. How can you get dispirited and stop fighting, though? How can you opt to stay home and not vote? And let me be clear, as I've said before, there is a stark difference between being Jewish and being black in America today. But being a Jew helps me to be an empathic ally and advocate. And we share the experience of knowing, as Whitney Houston said, that no matter what they take from me, they can't take away my dignity. There are comparisons. American blacks had George Wallace accusing them of being less than human. And American Jews had Joe McCarthy accusing them of being less than American. And today, we have Joe McCarthy and George Wallace all in one. Together at last, like Aunt Jemima's pancakes with the syrup. And the Wallace-McCarthy merger is a brand of white supremacy that we can never allow to subvert the American dream. We can never allow it to crush our spirit. I will never allow it to crush mine. For that little boy was me. The curse of Canaan is a soul-crushing passivity, the face of relentless attack on our humanity. The blessing of Canaan is the blessing of dignity. It is the blessing of a promised land 400 years in the making. In his laws of Teshuvah, Maimonides lists 5 sins that are hard to shake. Among them is dignifying oneself through the humiliation of another. It's hard to shake because most of us are indifferent to the humiliation of others, so there's little motivation, social peer pressure to repent. For the Jew, this means we have to place an even greater emphasis on preserving the dignity of our neighbor. In Tractate Avot, Rabbi Eliezer says, "Let your neighbor's dignity be precious to you as your own." In Hebrew, we have an expression, it's called kavod habriot, the dignity of all God's creatures. And it is paramount in our sources, in our value system. It is a large part of the reason the rabbis frowned on slavery, for instance, thousands of years ago, even as the Torah allowed it to a very limited degree. The Talmud adds, "So great is human dignity that it supersedes a negative commandment of the Torah." And this value of kavod habriot actually lay at the roots of the conservative movement's responsum allowing gay marriage. In 1992, the Knesset in Israel passed a basic law on human dignity and freedom. There were 12 clauses, and 4 of them established a broad entitlement to dignity in Israel. These basic laws have been cited in a broad array of appeals to the Israeli Supreme Court in cases considering the rights of its Arab citizens. One rabbi, Eliezer Waldenberg, cites human dignity as the justification to allow a hearing-impaired person to wear a hearing aid on Shabbat, which otherwise would not seem to be allowable. But he said, in the hierarchy of halachic values, God's dignity is highest, but human dignity is not far below. Quotes Psalm 8, verse 6, that you have made humanity a little less than divine, but adorned humanity with glory and majesty. Now, carrying on Shabbat is not typically allowed, but the rabbis allowed it. For examples, this one, for example, this is so that people could carry smooth stones up to a rooftop. Why? They didn't have Charmin back then. Let's put it that way. They used the stones to wipe themselves for sanitary purposes. You could carry a stone up to the rooftop on Shabbat because that is the dignified thing to do. You could carry a corpse out of your house on Shabbat. It's carrying. You're not allowed to usually carry. But to do that, it is the dignified thing to do. These things seem sort of out of the ordinary and strange, but not this year. Think of all the indignities we've had to suffer during this year of COVID, from rationing toilet paper to the removal of dead bodies. We know that some have had to remain on refrigerated trucks for days before being granted the dignity of a proper burial. And is there anything more undignified than dying alone with no loved one able to caress you while you breathe your final breaths? Is there anything more undignified than having to be buried with no one present but the rabbi and the gravedigger? Is there anything more undignified than being forced to risk deathly illness in order to do basic human tasks like buying a loaf of bread or going to school or voting? We know all about the lack of dignity. This year we've all been afflicted by the curse of Canaan. And so our mission as Jews, our calling, is to reverse that curse, to care for the ill, as our first responders and medical professionals have done so beautifully, to humanize isolation, as we've tried to do here in so many ways, as we're trying to do right now, to fight the continued deportations of migrants and the separations of families, to fight for all those denied the dignity of a paying job or a hot meal, for those without power after a storm who can't stay with a neighbor for fear of infection. Our mission is to reverse that curse for the sake of kavod habriot, the dignity of all creatures, and to get that knee off our neck, to fight hatred and injustice wherever it exists. We can do that. The first step to restoring dignity to others is to realize it in ourselves, to realize that no one can take it away from us, that our trek to Canaan can lead us to a city on a hill, a new Canaan, as it were. Not the last station before heaven, but the first station before holiness, and the fulfillment of our collective destiny of becoming truly what we were meant to be. To take in this view of Mount Canaan and Mount Meron, as seen from Tzfat by our Bethel group in 2005, is to absorb a sense of strength, of identity, of history, of belonging, of pride, and of beauty, and mission, and purpose. All the qualities embedded in the color purple. Mount Canaan is our purple mountain's majesty. For Jews, for blacks, and for everyone else who's been scarred by the stain of hate, we are all that little boy and that little girl, tempest-tossed in a wave of worldwide disdain. I think it pisses God off if you walk by the color purple in a field somewhere and don't notice it. And I think it pisses God off even more when we don't see that beauty in ourselves. Because only then can we share that magnificent gift with the world, the gift of dignity and pride, of kavod habriot. And when we do that, we will affirm for all to hear that our lives and all lives do matter more than we ever could have known. Amen. And I'd like to share this postscript. As I was preparing to deliver this sermon, I wrote back to that expectant mother that I mentioned yesterday, who asked about the name of Canaan. I wanted to send her the final text to say, yeah, it's okay, good name. Sadly, Canaan passed away in utero. I told her I would dedicate these sermons, if she wanted, to his memory, and she absolutely wanted me to and thanked me. And so the final impression is this: even Canaan himself didn't make it to the promised land, but let us all resolve to bring him there. Amen.